What's up, guys? Welcome to Drake on Digital. Today we're going to be talking about one of the latest trends that I'm looking for in 2023 in the crypto markets. It's actually hidden in plain sight, but not a lot of people are talking about it. Most people right now are focused on Base Chain, Mantle, and a couple of other chains that have the rumors of a potential airdrop. And as you can see here, the TVL on Base Chain has been, well, up only, except for maybe a good portion of a few days. And this had to do with the rise and the rug pull of Bald. Now, they also had some issues with lead swap and a exploit, but they do have a couple of other dexes that are starting to gain dominance. You got Base Swap, Sushi, Rocket, Coconut Swap, and even Uniswap is now launched on here. Now I'm going to share with you guys a couple of details on Base Chain, but in general, I'm going to focus on the narrative that I'm looking at towards the end of the video. These are all going to be a couple of cookie crumbles that lead up to, well, the main cookie. And it has to do with, I'll spoil it, Optimism. But it's going to be a token that lives on Optimism. So as you can see here on Base, most of the volume is going on Rocket Swap, and B-Swap is also picking up as well, but B-Swap mainly has a lot of the liquidity because of the highly inflationary tokenomics. Cocos really didn't gain much liquidity because they don't have any incentives. Really, all they have on Cocos is, well, just real yield from the swaps on the DEX. If they're trying to compete with the other highly incentivized farms, they're going to have to incentivize this liquidity to drive some volume. The other one that has most of the trading volume on Base Chain right now is Rocket Swap. Rocket Swap, they do have a locker for people who are looking to lock LPs. So I do see that as a utility for the chain itself, for people who are like, hey, look, our liquidity is locked. And you also have a launchpad and you have some farms and vaults to farm the Rocket token. Now, to go into Coinbase, the reason why Base Chain is important to bring some inflows is back in 2022, well, now it's 2023, so they probably have a little bit less users. But in 2022, Coinbase ranked in over 108 million users. Now, this is important to understand because the official launch of Coinbase Chain, or the Base Chain bridge being officially opened, is going to happen on the 9th, which is tomorrow. And as you can see here, in partnership with Nouns, they are going to be using 100 ETH that they were given to incentivize liquidity, as well as give as grants on the chain for the next month and a half. I'm sure there will be other NFT collections that take a similar avenue. The reason for that is it's a marketing ploy. You now have all these other Coinbase users that are like, whoa, what's Nouns? And then they check out the NFT collection. So I think a 100 ETH investment was actually a pretty good investment for Nouns if it does bring a new set of eyes onto the NFT collection. Remember, as there's trading happening with their NFTs, some of that revenue actually goes back to the Nouns team. Now, the reason why I'm talking about Base Chain as well, that's kind of like the talk of the town right now. But this is going to lead into Optimism for a couple of reasons. Base Chain is built with the OP stack. So if you didn't understand how the OP stack works, is basically any protocols and chains that are building using the OP stack, a portion of that revenue is actually going to the Optimism Foundation. The same goes for protocols built on Optimism. Now, Coinbase Chain isn't the only chain that's being built on Optimism. You also have OPBNB. So the L2 for BNB is also built with Optimism. You also have WorldCoin, and there are a couple of others. And I believe this is just the beginning for the Optimism Foundation. And if you take a look at a snapshot of the layer 2s of Arbitrum versus Optimism, you can see here that Optimism is on the rise versus Arbitrum on the decline. Now, everything is relative. You can see here this is in 200K and this is in 100K, but you can see here that the trend is your friend, well, until the end. You can see here the addresses over time for Optimism are constantly increasing, as well as the transactions over time, they're increasing as compared to Arbitrum. Now remember, Arbitrum, they probably had most of the transactions going into the airdrop, and that was the same for Optimism, and then obviously it drops off after it closes out. But then they also incentivize the chain some more and get more people to use it. And the same thing will happen with Arbitrum as well. But I'm just trying to point out the fact that Optimism is on growth. You can see here that the reason why Optimism wants more transactions and more volume on their chain is they generate revenue from the sequencer. So the sequencer generates revenue, and they use that revenue to give out grants to incentivize builders to build and users to use the chain, which then goes to use demand for OP block space, which generates revenue for the sequencer. And then you have this cyclical flywheel of a revenue system. And while you're having base chain and Binance's layer 2 doing their thing, this will also drive more revenue to the Optimism Foundation. You can see here the TVL actually hasn't been doing that bad on Optimism. It is trying to get above that billion, but in my opinion, with a couple of catalysts, I do believe it will get over that. Right now, we are in a PvP environment, so most people are going to airdrop chains as well as other chains that have heavy incentives. So this is where I get into the token that I want to talk about, that I do believe will be a nice catalyst for Optimism. It has to do with Velodrome. Velodrome is currently sitting with a total TVL of $252 million. And what's interesting about this VE33 DEX is that, well, they've only seen a bear market. I can't wait to see what this does in a bull market, but just taking a look at the total rewards and the incentives on the chain, or for Velodrome just this week, they are about to hit $1 million in rewards. This is every single week. And these rewards go to the VE Velo stakers, or the VE Velo holders. Now, these are liquid NFTs that you can use to vote for any of these pools, and typically some people are swayed to vote on a particular pool because there are a certain amount of incentives that are like, hey, look, if I vote here, I get this amount of money. So an example is if I had some voting power to vote on this pool, and there's a total of $122,000 to get from revenue from this, if I vote on this and I have a 1% share of this, I would be getting $122 in rewards. Now, if I was the only voter for this pool, which is not likely because most people vote for them, especially when it's high incentives, I would get all of those rewards and incentives. So the flywheel that Velodrome generates for the Optimism Foundation is that farmers come to Optimism to chase these APRs. I'll show you guys a couple of the APRs that they have, but they are juicy. You can see here that you can get an APR of 472% with Velo and Spell, or if you simply are just looking for something that's a little bit less degen, but it's still semi-degen, you can go with Taro and USDC, and you can earn a 281% APR. The reason why I call Taro a less degen is if you look at the price of the Taro token, it's kind of been steady throughout time. It ranges between 6 cents and 10 cents. I know that may seem a little bit volatile, but in general, for a crypto asset, that is pretty steady. And you can really see here since middle of May towards June, actually, if you even go back further, it's just been trading in this range for a good bit of time. And the reason why it recently pumped is they bribed one of the pools for the Taro pool to get a higher APR for people to vote on them, and people claimed those and got those rewards as a Velodrome staker. So Velodrome creates this economy that has almost a water cooler situation where people who never knew about Taro or even Bike or even Optidoge now understand about it or learn about it because they're coming to Velodrome every single week to vote on these different pools to get some of these incentives. So I call Velodrome or any of the VE33 dexes like the water cooler of the chain. It's a way to get advertising as well as liquidity. So after farmers are coming to chase the APRs, farmers begin buying the native Optimism tokens, which kind of juices the chain. So you have people buying Quinta, you have people buying Velo, of course, you have people buying synthetics, you have people buying a bunch of other random tokens that are listed on Velodrome, like Taro, Optidoge, Bike, and it's because people are chasing these different APRs. And when you have people chasing different APRs, this is going to add liquidity to the chain, which then juices activity and trading volume on the chain, which goes as revenue for the Velo stakers. And if you want to learn more about the VE33 economy, I highly recommend you guys check out this video. I'll link it in the description below, and I'll tag it at the end of the video so you guys can check it out. But this explains the VE33 model. Second is you have farmers buying OP native coins, which is juicing the volume on the chain as well as juicing the total trading volume for Velodrome, which goes as revenue to Velo stakers. So the Optimism Foundation is now generating this revenue, which then is distributed as grants to other protocols. Which you can see here, part of this flywheel. This value goes to users and builders to incentivize people to continue to use the chain as well as farm. But going back to the token model on Velodrome, this is kind of a quick snapshot of how the Velodrome VE33 model works. First, you start with higher emissions. When you have higher emissions, this brings more liquidity because people are coming to chase these APRs. I mean, let me just give you an example. We'll go with a stable pool and we'll just look for a USDC in MAI. Who doesn't want 30% on a stable coin? Or even if you went to extra finance and decide to leverage loop with some of these different farms, you can earn even up to 150% with these stablecoin pools, or actually in this case 160%, just depending on how many times you leverage loop the stablecoin. Now, it's easier to leverage with a stablecoin as long as it holds its peg pretty well, because, well, if these are stable assets, if they're one-to-one, I mean, they're typically going to stay similar in price. It's tough to use leverage when it's a volatile asset when it comes to farming. So you then have farmers chasing these yields. And you also have people looking to lend out to these degens who are like, I don't want to play the Velodrome game. Instead, I want to go ahead and lend out some Velo, some OP token. I want some ETH. I want to get 15% on my ETH. I want to get 25% on my USDC without having to do anything. You can do that here using something like extra finance. So again, this brings in more liquidity. Now, this creates less slippage. So instead of all the trades going to other dexes, it's going to go with the dex that gives the best prices. And it will give less slippage, which generates more trading volume because more people are coming through there, because there's less slippage on the trade, which generates more fees, and then that goes to the Velo stakers. Now, if you remember, Optimism is incentivized to distribute grants to these different protocols that are generating volumes on the chain. So Optimism is also subsidizing Velodrome because they understand that, hey, instead of just giving OP tokens to Aave, Synthetics, Quinta, and just giving them to use and give out to people, instead they realize that when OP tokens are given to Velodrome and they are distributed in the form of bribes and incentivizing people to vote on some of these pools, this incentivizes people to lock up. They also use the OP token as a way to incentivize people just to simply lock the Velo token. Once you lock it, it pulls tokens off the market, and you have the buy pressure from people buying the Velo token and locking it up. When you juice buy pressure on the Velo token, this juices the APRs of all of these farms, and it continues that cyclical flywheel. So if you want to learn more about the solidly model, you guys can check out the previous video, but mainly in general, the narrative that I'm looking at for 2023 is going to do with Velodrome as well as Optimism. Mainly in particular with the catalyst of all the other chains being built using the OP stack with revenue given to the Optimism Foundation, and then Velodrome creating this liquidity black hole with the solidly model. Now, the solidly VE33 model right now is being bootstrapped with the OP token, so it is going to be dependent on that. But what's going to be interesting to see what happens is Solidly's never been alive or been around for a bull market. It's only been around for a bear market. Now this is, you can call it a highly inflationary token model, and we've seen how that works in the past with, well, Bull Run V1 for DeFi. When you had Trader Joe just popping off, Sushi Swap, you had Yam, you had all these different DeFi protocols that were doing thousands of % in APR as people were coming to buy the token and just farm the mess out of it. This is kind of what the snapshot looks like if you're locking some of the Velo tokens. And obviously this is decaying over time as more and more people are locking their Velo. You can see here currently it's distributing about 8.37 OP. This is currently about, let's just call it $20. And based on current prices, the current price of 5,000 VE Velo is going to set you back about $600. Now, most of you might think, oh, well, that's a doo-doo rebate. Well, it's basically just getting 3% off for every dollar locked for 4 years. This isn't even factoring in the bribes that you get. But there's one thing I do want to mention that is a little bit better than the bonus from OP. And that has to do with airdrops. Now, this is the coolest thing that is going to be coming to base chain, in my opinion, and that has to do with Airdrome. Airdrome is deciding to give, like literally an airdrop, 40% of their total tokens to people who have locked on Velodrome. So anyone who has their VE Velo and they are lockers, they're getting a 40% airdrop. Now, Airdrome's not the only one. There are several other protocols that randomly did this. In fact, I'm a locker on Velodrome, so I randomly got these airdrops from other VE33 dexes like Solisnek. Also got Retro Finance, Pearl.fi, Chronos.fi. There was a list of a bunch of them. And then I even got this random meme coin called Bike. I don't know, maybe it does something, maybe it doesn't. But yeah, it was like a couple $100 just for no reason. So I just call Velodrome the gift that keeps on giving. But I'm definitely looking forward to this Aerodrome airdrop for people who are locking Velo. So the Solidly model creates this kind of contained, highly inflationary token model, which decays over time. So kind of like Bitcoin, where Bitcoin started out as 50 Bitcoin for a block reward, then they have the halvening. The same thing happens with the Solidly model. They have a epoch that reduces the inflation by 2%. So hence why you see them talk about the epoch on Velodrome and any of the other Solidly forks. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it was kind of a little bit long and a little bit different, but if you guys want to check out some of the previous videos, you guys can check that out on the YouTube channel. The previous video I made for the VE33, I'll drop in the description below. And if you guys would like to join the exclusive Discord, there's a link in the description below. In the Discord, there will be exclusive content that I don't show on YouTube, as well as some other plays that I don't share on YouTube or on Twitter. You can also chat with a couple of other DeFi degens just like you. As always, guys, let's go ahead and hit you guys with a wisdom one-liner. Proverbs chapter 11, verses 10. When the righteous prosper, the city rejoices. When the wicked perish, there are shouts of joy. Be good, be righteous. Peace.